Welcome to the keynote session of the ICCE conference. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce this morning Tanja MITROVIC. She is a professor of the shown here in the complementary group at the University of Italy Research in Italy. She originally from she graduated in the University of Nagy in Australia in 1994, I think. And then she moved to New Zealand. And she has been very active researcher. She published more than 240 papers up to now. And she got very great, and she's very active, and mainly because she's active and she's so big, great blogging. And she was the president of the International AI Conference, and she's now in the president-elect. She surprised me many times because she was assigned a dean of her faculty. We should guess the dean is so busy of the routine work. Her research activity never decreased when she has been a dean. And she finished for 2-year term. And she was asked the external dean. She didn't refuse. And it's very surprising that she's still now some kind of the dean work in doing as achieving such a very high research work. And she has a big contribution to our community by doing research on constraint-based learner modeling. It's very surprising, and to me, she surprised me that she has so energetic. She is doing a dean and being research, both she balances well. And then the second surprise, she surprised me that she's not the constraint-based learner modeling. So it's new to me. To be honest, I didn't know that she is involved in the active learning. So I very look forward to what she is going to talk to us. Please join me to welcome Tanja.
Thank you, Richiro, for your kind words. Hello, everyone. It's always difficult to get enough people after the banquet, but thank you for being here. I have to say that I'm really surprised that it's already the last day of the conference, and also I have to say that it's much nicer not being an organizer. So thank you, Didit, for everything. You did a perfect job. So as Richiro said, some of you might know that most of my work has been on constraint-based tutors, and this talk is not about constraint-based tutors. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about a new project we started 3 years ago. And first of all, I would like to introduce my team. This is some of them, not everyone. So from Leeds, we have Vanya and Lydia and Alicia. From Canterbury, Moffat and Jay and Matthew Gordon. He was my honor student. He finished and he now works for industry. And from Adelaide, Amali. And there are also other people. So, as you all know, video watching is very popular for different kinds of learning. We all use it for informal learning. It's used for flipped classroom. It's used in MOOCs and so on. But there is a big problem. I think I mixed up the slides. Did I? No, I didn't. So the big problem with video watching is that it's so easy to watch videos passively and not being engaged. So that was one of the things we wanted to look at. And our first motivation was to try something different. In my previous work, I developed intelligent tutoring systems for different kinds of cognitive skills. It was always problem solving in ill or well-defined domains. But then we started thinking, what about transferable skills? how do we teach our students to communicate better, how we teach them to understand each other, to negotiate, to work in teams, and so on. And one of the first things we wanted to do was actually presentation skills. And that comes from the fact that we work with our students every day in computer science, software engineering. Some of you might know people usually don't have very good social skills and presentation skills. So that's why we decided to start with that. Now, because video watching often becomes very passive, there are lots of different strategies that teachers use. One option is, for example, to play the video in the classroom and then engage students in discussions about the video, or to add quizzes or questions to the video itself. Now, all of that requires additional effort from the teacher, and we wanted to avoid that. So our approach is to use interactive note-taking. Of course, this is not new. It's used everywhere. It's used in YouTube. Students are already familiar, but we added additional support for engagement. Now, our work is based on the iCube framework, and I'm sure that some of you know about this. Mickey Chi actually had an team-invited talk at this conference, and that's how I heard about it for the first time. So, in a series of papers, this is one of them, they talked about different types of learning in terms of engagement, how much the student is engaged. And basically here we have a classification into different types of learning based on overt behavior, so things we can see about the student's behavior. So passive learning is when the student is, for example, listening to the lecture, watching a video, but not performing any additional action. The second one, active learning. So the student is, for example, listening to a lecture and taking notes, but the notes are pretty much whatever the lecturer said. Okay? The third type, constructive. So the student might be, again, in a lecture situation, but the student is not just noting down what the lecturer said. In addition, the student is making some kind of inferences, connecting what the lecturer is talking about to other things, maybe drawing concept maps or something like that. And finally, the last type of learning, interactive. This could be a situation when the learner is working with a peer or with a tutor or with a computer tutor, so there is a dialogue going on. And in her papers, Mickey Chi said basically that the most productive type of learning is interactive, and then it decreases when we have constructive or active or passive learning. So this is the framework we started from, and I'll tell you how basically we operationalized this approach. So in terms of video, learning from videos, passive learning would be just watching a video and not doing anything else. Active learning would be watching the video and maybe performing actions like fast forward or going back to rewatch a part of the video. And then when we talk about constructive learning, we talk about note-taking, making comments on what they see in the video itself. Now, in our approach, we don't have collaborative learning, so we don't actually have any instances of interactive learning. So I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. So we developed this platform that we call Devi WSpace, AVW for active video watching. It is a controlled video watching environment. It is very similar to YouTube because we wanted something that students are already familiar with. It is based on an earlier platform. So there was an earlier EU project, and Vanya was the leader on that project. So developed an idea for the platform, but then later on we redeveloped it and added lots of new elements to it. So I have the URL here. If anyone is interested in trying it out, I would be very happy to give you access to it, and you can see what happens. Now, during learning, we divided learning into two phases. We have the personal phase, and this is when the student is watching videos and making comments on videos. And then in the second phase, which is the social one, we open the comments to the whole class. They're anonymized, but the students can see what other people commented about, and they can rate them as well. So the materials that we developed, so now I'm talking about this particular focus on presentation skills. The platform, however, is a general one, so it could be used for any skill. It doesn't have to even be a transferable skill, it could be a cognitive skill as well. So for our experiments, we found 8 videos on YouTube. We spent a lot of time actually selecting the videos. So these are publicly available videos. 4 of them are tutorials on how to give a good presentation. And we tell students to start by watching those 4. And then after that, we provided 4 examples of real presentations. Things like, you might have heard about PhD in 3 minutes. Lots of universities do that to kind of encourage PhD students to be very succinct and up to the point and present their research in only 3 minutes. So we have that kind of presentations for examples. So I mentioned that we have support for engagement. And basically we have 2 types of support. We have aspects and we have rating categories. Aspects are different for tutorials and for examples. Again, we spent a lot of time deciding on these aspects. We call them micro scaffolds for reflection. We wanted something that will make the student think about their past experience. Because in order to learn transferable skills, it's really necessary to contextualize learning in the, to think about your own experience, and also the ability to see things from another point of view. That's also very important. Okay? So for tutorials, we have, I'm rather good at this, so thinking about their past experience and presentations. Or I did or saw this in the past. I didn't realize I wasn't doing this. So this is the aspect that signals to us that they have learned something new. And finally, I like this point because that's the usual thing you have in this kind of environments. Now for examples, the aspects are different because we wanted to focus the students' attention on the different elements of presentation skills, such as delivery, speech, structure, and visual aids. Okay? Now, in order to deal with all of this, we developed a presentation skills ontology, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So this is the screenshot from the presentation, and here is one of the tutorial videos. So the student can start playing the video. At any point, when they want to make a comment, they can write the comment. They select one of the aspects and then save the comment. And on the right, you can see the previous comments this particular student made on this video. So they're just ordered temporarily, so based on the time in the video when the comment was made. And this is a screenshot of the social space. So when the teacher opens the comments for the whole class, they can go to the video and they can see the comments written by other people. And on this slide, you might be able to see, although it's really, really small, the aspects we have defined, the rating categories we have defined. So, for example, this is useful for me. Now, this is a signal that they are learning from other people's comments. So it's kind of social learning. Or I hadn't thought of this, I didn't notice this, and then I don't agree or I like this point, so saying whether the student agrees or not with something that someone else said. So the initial studies, so far we have actually done 8 studies with Devi WSpace. The initial studies were done in 2017, last year, and we had a number of questions. This was actually presented at the IAD conference last year. We wanted to see, first of all, are they learning something useful from ABW? And also, if there are different behaviors, which type of the behavior leads to increased learning? The second question was about the microscaffolds. Are they useful or not? Are they going to learn more when they tag their comments with aspects and when they rate comments written by other people? And also whether there were any notable usage patterns in that kind of behavior. Then the third question is about the learner problem. If we identify different types of behaviors, what are the differences between different types of learners? And finally, with AVW. So I'll tell you a little bit. I'm not going to talk about all studies, don't worry, that's way too much. But I'll tell you a little bit about the first two, because those first two studies shaped the further research on AVW. So in the first study, that was done with postgraduate students and recruited students from various places. Most of them were from the University of Canterbury and the University of Leeds, but we also sent invitations to the ICCE members, and we had a few students from that group as well. So in this first study, we had only one group, so there was only one condition. They watched the videos, they had aspects for the videos, and later on they rated comments written by others. Now the second study was done with a very different type of students. I recruited some volunteers from an undergraduate software engineering course from my university. And we divided them into two groups. In the first phase, the experimental aspects, but the control group didn't have aspects. So that allowed us to actually see whether aspects are useful or not. And then they, again, rated the videos. Now, the control group only participated in the private phase. They didn't rate the videos. So we wanted to see whether both commenting and rating of comments contributes to learning. We collected a lot of data, and this is really fun, but also takes a lot of time. So we had demographic data. We used the Motivated Strategies for Learning questionnaire to look at students' learning strategies and metacognitive skills. Then we had a conceptual knowledge. Their next presentation to tell us what they are thinking about when presentation. Received usefulness, and we used the technology and acceptance model, and we used the cognitive load model to see whether they find it demanding and so on. So in addition to all of that, which we got from surveys, we also collected interaction traces. So we have information about which videos they watched, how many comments they made, and when they made those comments, and also about ratings. So the ontology, this is a high-level view. So basically, we developed the ontology using the middle-out approach. So we looked at what students wrote about in comments, but we also looked at guides that university usually publish about how to present and that kind of stuff. And then later on, the ontology was refined, and we are still refining it, basically. Now, to assess conceptual knowledge, this was done in a very simple way. So in our surveys, we have 3 questions, and we give students 1 minute per question. And we tell them, write everything you know about structure, delivery and speech, or video aids when it comes to presentations. Okay? So this was open question. They could write about anything. And in the very first study, what we have done is we started from the initial version of our ontology, and we had 3 markers who marked the entries students made. And there was quite good agreement also for the second study. Of course, we didn't agree on every single entry. So we had the 4th person who went over everything, checked whether we agreed or not. In some cases, there was remarking, and that also led to the improved version of the ontology. And as I said, we are still improving this ontology. So back to the studies. In study 1, we had 48 volunteers, and 38 of them completed all the different phases and all the surveys. In the second study, we had 37 volunteers, divided, as I said, into 2 groups, more males than females, which is usual for computer science. And then we looked at whether learning improved. So when I talk about improvement, I'm actually talking about the increase in the conceptual knowledge score. So how many things they wrote about structure, delivery in speech, and visual aids. Now, in this table, so these are the constructive learners who have written comments and who rated comments written by others. So in the first study, pretty much everyone wrote comments, which is not surprising because these are mostly PhD students, so typically they have very good metacognitive skills, they know, they have good learning strategies and so on. Now, in the second study, we also had some constructive learners. There were 13 of them. The other students, some of them were passive, so they watched videos but they haven't written anything. And then the last column in this table, we call them inactive learners. So these are students who have filled the surveys, but they have not even logged onto the platform. So they haven't seen any of the videos at all. But they still fill the surveys, which was surprising. So the findings are that only constructive learners improved from survey 1 to survey 2 and survey 3. And we have seen that for the postgraduate students, but also for the undergraduate students. Only the constructive learners improved. We also made a recommendation for our future work based on this finding. And we said we need to enhance the environment somehow to enforce this behavior, to foster constructive behavior. So to move from passive watching to being more engaged with the videos. We also looked at whether microscaffolds help, so the aspects in the rating categories. Now, in study 1, just to remind you, this is where we had more constructive learners. There were 790 comments. In study 2, that number was smaller because there were fewer participants, but there was no difference in how many comments constructive learners made. So on average, they were making about 19 comments for the whole set of videos. The engagement, I forgot to mention, these videos are really short. As you see, the longest one is 8.5 minutes, and there are shorter ones. We have some that are only about 3 minutes. So students made a lot of comments. They made more comments on tutorials than on examples, which is, again, not surprising because this is meant to help them learn, so they wanted to learn more. Almost all the comments had ratings on them, and you can also see the number of ratings in the social space. So there was a lot of engagement. So this is from the postgraduate group. In terms of aspects, in the first study, students had to use aspects, so they could submit a comment without using the aspect. And if you look at the distribution of various types of aspects, the dark blue color is no aspect selected. So a quarter were written without aspects, and then there were some also ratings without actually selecting a particular category. In both studies, students used "I like this point" a lot, so that was the dominant type of aspect used. And we also looked at how they engaged in the social space. So this is about ratings. We divided the ratings into 2 groups. The ones that actually the student learned something new while rating other comments, and also the ones that induce opinion. So there was a good spread of different types of ratings in both studies. So basically, did microscaffolds help? We have seen, now these numbers are really small because the second study was not big, but we have seen that only those students who had aspects, they improved significantly. Constructive learners from the control group, so these are people who wrote comments but didn't tag them with aspects, they didn't improve significantly. So the finding from this, again, was that microscaffolds are useful, and our recommendation was that in future studies, students would always be asked to tag their comment with the aspect, and also to add some kind of intelligent support for students to be actively using aspects in an appropriate way. Okay. Also for the ratings, to add intelligent support to encourage ratings, and to include the use of microscaffolds in the student profile so that we can provide intelligent support. There was a lot of difference. I'm not expecting you to look at the numbers, but basically we compared students using the scales from the MSLQ questionnaire, which are things like self-efficacy, academic control, effort regulation, organization, elaboration, and self-regulation. So there was significant difference between students on those dimensions. So for example, if you look at self-regulation, postgraduate students scored much higher on that in comparison to undergraduate students, and that's understandable. In the table I also have some information from the demographic part of the questionnaire. So for example, we asked the students to use YouTube, how much they use YouTube, and how much they use YouTube for learning. And if you compare, look at the numbers, postgraduate students use YouTube much less in comparison to the undergraduate ones. So basically from this we found that it would be useful to use these features in the learner profile to provide intelligent support later. So the finding was that more experienced students are more likely to exhibit target behaviors, so to be constructive, write comments and rate comments. And we wanted, for that reason, to add past experience and these scales from an MSLQ questionnaire to the user profile. Now, different strategies are needed for different types of learners. For constructive learners, they are already actively writing comments and using aspects, but we wanted to encourage them to refer to the past experience. And for the passive learners, we wanted to add support which will foster constructive behaviors, so to encourage them to write comments. And one of the other recommendations was to investigate whether there are differences between constructive learners. I think I'm going to skip this because of the time. There was, just briefly, there was difference in what students thought about ABD. So 45% of the postgraduate students found writing comments demanding, and this is a quote from one of the students: proper attention to understand what was explained, to recall my experience and perceive the usefulness of the tactics told by the presenter. So this was very nice to see that they were reflecting on their past experience. There was a significant difference of the usefulness of commenting for the two studies. In study one, so these are PhD students, they found rating comments much more useful than writing comments. And we think that's because PhD students are more experienced in giving presentations. So just watching tutorials was not that useful for them, but seeing what other people have written about the videos was interesting. On the contrary, for the undergraduate students, they found rating less useful. And again, that's because of the pre-existing knowledge. So they learned more from tutorials than just looking at what other people wrote. We also looked at whether they were frustrated or not. So in study one, they reported that rating was more rating. And that's simply because of the interface that we used. So when they start a video, they see all the comments the whole class has written. So that was a very large number of comments. And the comments were not sorted, so they wrote about that. 20% did not find rating useful for the reasons I mentioned. So there were lots of comments. Some of the comments were not of good quality. There were many similar comments. And there was no structure for the comments. Recommendations, first to add some support for personal space to aid reflection and to write high quality comments. Space to add support to focus on comments which will be useful for a particular learner. Now, I mentioned that we also looked at whether all constructive learners are the same. So this is the result of clustering we have done with the data from study 1, so postgraduate students. We got 3 clusters. So the cluster on the features we got from the first survey, so demographic information and the MSLQ values, nothing else. So you see there are 3 clusters. The first cluster we called parochial. So these are people who have written some comments, but the comments were not very insightful. The quality of comments was not really that good. The second cluster we called habitual video watchers. So these people wrote very few comments. And our interpretation of this was that that's normal way of watching videos for them. And then we had this last cluster, which was the biggest one, 17 learners. And this is our ideal cluster. So these people wrote a very large number of comments, and they were very high. And if you look at the features, so these people had a lot of experience previously. The green color, that's whether they use YouTube for learning or not. So these people didn't use YouTube very much, but their metacognitive skills were good. Okay? So obviously, even for constructive learners, there is different type of support that is needed. This is just comparing people from different clusters. Now, in collaboration with Ulrich and his group, we also did some work on what kind of vocabulary they use in comments. And this was actually presented last year at the ICCE conference in Christchurch. So this is the network that was developed by Ulrich's group looking at habitual video watchers. So these are people who make very few comments. Okay, and you see that there are not too many links between different people or between different topics from their comments. But if we go to the ideal cluster, so these are our self-regulated learners. The network is much, much bigger. There is a lot of overlap, so they share the common vocabulary, so they have enough knowledge and basically react to the videos in the same way. So after doing these initial few studies, we started thinking, how are we going to implement this intelligent support? And we decided to go. So how many of you are familiar with this book? A few people. This book, Nagy, was published in 2008. It was written by Richard Teller and Cass Sunstein from the University of Chicago. Richard actually got the Nobel Prize last year for this work. Richard Teller is an economist, and his co-author is a professor of law. And the point of this book is that we have to be careful about how we design different environments. So they define a nudge to be a feature of the environment that attracts our attention and influences our behavior. The book is really nice to read. I suggest to the ones of you who haven't seen it to read it. It's so nice. So basically they give examples of from everyday life. Like, for example, you go to a cafeteria, and based on how food is arranged, that would influence what you eat subconsciously. Okay? So if you, for example, see salads first, it's more likely that you are going to go for the healthy options. But if you see chips and hamburgers or whatever, that's going to result in different kinds of consequences. So basically what they're saying is this book is that we shouldn't restrict the freedom for people to choose, but we should nudge them in the right direction so that they make good decisions. And by good decisions, they mean things that are good for us. So for our health, for our well-being, for our wealth as well. So they're not talking about, for example, what happens in the supermarkets that you have all the candies and chocolate bars near the cashier because you spend so much time there and just out of boredom you buy these things. So they're talking about that it's important to design these choice architectures in a way are going to result in good decisions. Okay, so that's what we started from. And the principles of choice architecture are basically we should maximize capability to regulate our own behavior. So educate the users to be able to make good decisions. And then increase motivation to engage in the desired behavior or reduce motivation to discontinue undesired behaviors. So in our case, that would be nudge the learners towards writing comments and rating comments. And also maximize opportunity to support self-regulation. So what does this mean for Devi WSpace? By capability, we want to take into account the features of a particular learner, so the learner profile, and also their previous knowledge or experience about the target skill, in this case presentation skill. The motivation, so we want to add support to increase constructive behavior, so to encourage the student to write more comments. And then when it comes to opportunity, to automatically identify different times at which we can intervene and support engagement. So what we have done with Devi WSpace, we added the learner model, we added interactive visualizations, and we added some nudges. We are still working on this, so this is the current state. The project is still ongoing. So the nudges are divided in nudges that happen before interaction. So for example, now when we invite participants, I send them an email and I describe what they're going to do, and then at the end I say, by the way, students who have participated in previous studies increase their knowledge significantly. So that's like a small nudge. They still don't have to do it, but we inform them about what happened previously. And then we have some nudges that we have added, and I'll show you in a moment. While they're watching videos, we give them nudges as well, and some nudges that provide positive feedback. So the way we did it, we looked at the data from previous studies, the clustering, the other information, the other results we obtained from previous studies. Then we looked at high attention intervals, and I'll show you in a moment what that means. And then we also processed comments to find comments with high social values. So these are comments which were found useful by other participants during the rating phase. So the high attention interval, so this is an illustration of what happens. So over time, so on this axis we have time in the video, and each of these dots represents a comment students made. So this is from study 1, and different colors represent the 3 clusters. Remember the ideal cluster, that's the green dots, and then we have the habitual learners and the parochial learners. So you can see that they made very different number of comments. So we use this information to identify times in the video, which we call high attention interval, where there were lots of comments made, saying that there was something important at that particular time in the video. And we also looked for patterns. For example, here, only one cluster was engaged. The other 2 clusters didn't write any comments. So we looked at those times to see what was going on. So in this particular case, these are parochial learners, so they were commenting on something that's really not that important, and the other two clusters didn't do that. Or the opposite way, where we have interaction from two clusters but not from this one. So that was the starting point. We then added two types of interactive visualizations. The first one is the comment timeline, and the second one is comment. So let me show you what that means. Okay, so this is the screenshot from the new version of the platform. We still have the video and we still have the comments, but you can notice these two visualizations here. So the first one is the timeline. So each of these dots represent a comment, and we use different colors for the aspects. Now, the student can use this in two ways. Obviously, there were lots at the beginning, and there were lots of comments at the end, and then there were some in the middle. So that's like an index to finding useful places in the video as well. But the other thing that can happen is that the student can mouse over a particular dot, and they will see the text of the comment that was written at that particular space. So that's another kind of nudge, so they can see what other people were saying about that video. So that's the timeline. Now the histogram simply shows the number of comments at different parts of the video. So when we did this, we also added the nudges. I'll show you some of the nudges. And then we did a pilot study before going on to the full study to see whether these nudges and visualizations are useful. And our participants told us that we need to add some kind of introduction. So this is the introduction we added. We are telling them, take a look at these dots and take a look at the histogram. And also expect that you're going to get some hints in this space, okay? And on this slide you can see nudges appear. They appear as text. Make a comment. And nudges, don't forget to make a comment on the presentation techniques in the video. So let me show you a little bit more about, this is another nudge. So this is a nudge which says, how about making a comment? Another person in your class said, and then we give them an example of a comment. So the comments that we used in nudges, we selected them by hand, by looking at what other people have said, and we selected the top quality ones. So the experiment that we have done, we had the initial survey that was done in the first semester this year. So we invited students to participate. Phase 1 was to watch and comment on videos. Phase 2 was to examine comments written by others and to rate them. Then we opened survey 2 on May 24, and finally this particular study was closed on June 11th. So it was just over a month that students had access to the system. This study was done in Engineering 101. So this is the largest course in my university. Every single engineering student has to do this course. And they teach them different kinds of stuff. But one of the things is that in this course, the student works, which is Engineers Without Borders project. And at the end, they have to give presentation. And that's very scary for them, okay? So in the course, they teach them about how to give presentations. So we offer this as an online resource for them to learn more about presentations. Now, we divided several research questions. We wanted to look at whether interactive visualizations and nudges will be useful for learning. Also, whether they are effective. Are there now more students who write comments? Also, what kind of engagement happened? What actions have they performed? And finally, whether they liked it or not. Now, when it comes to conceptual knowledge, so in this table, I have information about students who have completed both surveys. Okay, so only those who completed both surveys. 16 of them were inactive, so they completed the surveys, but they haven't watched the videos. Of course, their knowledge has not changed from the pre to the post-test. Then we had 75 passive students. They watched videos, so at least one video. Some students watched the videos multiple times, not only once. Knowledge improved, but not significantly. And then we have our constructive students, and that was a significant improvement. So there was no difference on the conceptual knowledge at the beginning of the study, but there was a significant difference at the end of the study, where constructive students improved significantly. And then we also were thinking, can we really show that nudges and interactive visualizations are causing this increase in learning? So this is the result of path analysis. This is for the experimental group. So these are students who had nudges. And we found that this model has a very good fit. You can see all the effects. So this is conceptual knowledge at the beginning from the pre-test. This is conceptual knowledge at the end of the study. This is the number of nudges they received and the number of comments they made. So there is a significant effect of nudges on how many comments they write, and also significant effect of comments on the final knowledge. So that was really nice. So our nudges are working. We know that they're not perfect yet, so we are going to improve them in future versions, but at least they are working. So for the control group, just to mention, we couldn't find a good model. So there was no interaction between the number of comments and the final knowledge at all. And the effect on behavior. So this table shows the number of learners of various types in the control group. So we had 53 inactive, 95 passive, and 86 learners. Experimental group, the distribution is significantly different. So there is no difference on inactive students, but there are significantly more constructive students in the experimental group in comparison to the constructive students in the control group. Again, another sign that our nudges are working. So more students are engaged in this productive behavior. The effect on engagement, if you look at different videos, on the x-axis we have different videos, and you can see that the number of comments is always higher for the experimental group. So they did write more comments in comparison to the other group nudges. And then we also looked at what happened at different days of the study. So each of these points on the x-axis is one of the days during the study. And bars show the percentage of students who logged onto the platform who actually made comments. Okay? So the blue is experimental, red is control, and as you can see on most of the days, experimental students made the higher percentage of experimental students made comments. Now, when it comes to subjective feedback, we found also very good results. There was a significant interaction effect between the group and category, or by category I mean the type of behavior. So the constructive students from both groups provided significantly different answers to these two questions. I think I would like to use Devi WSpace frequently. And the second question, which was, I would recommend Devi WSpace to my friends. So constructive students provided much higher responses in comparison to the passive students. There were also similar results on the other questions from the technology acceptance model. So there was a significant effect of behavior. Constructive students thought that it would be good to improve soft skills, that also they would behave, that they would perform better, that they find it easy to do, it's clear, understandable, and easy to use. So on all these questions we had higher responses, higher scores from the experimental group students. Also, when we talk about demand, the question was actually how mental in the platform. And there was, again, significant interaction effect from group and category, with constructive students finding it much easier to write comments. For the other model, for passive students reported higher demand and higher frustration, and also lower performance on presentation skills, on commenting and on writing in comparison to the constructive students. Now, we also asked them how useful they found the visualizations and the nudges. Now, we are still processing the responses to these questions, but I have just included a few. So there were 100 responses, 85 of them were positive, and students said things like, I can see which parts of the video other people found useful, which is exactly what we wanted. Or I can compare myself with the rest of the class, so learning from peers. Some said clear aid on other thoughts. This is interesting. It's not very helpful in the tutorials because I don't care what other people did or didn't know, but it was interesting for the example videos to see what other students noticed. And I have also included one negative comment which said I didn't understand them till I finished most of the videos. So obviously there is space for improving the platform. And the usefulness of nudges, so here they were more divided. We had 91 responses. 8 participants said that they haven't noticed them at all. There were 62 positive and 21 negative responses. Positive, like, for example, help me to give me a little push in the right direction of what to comment on. Help you along without giving the answer. I found that helpful. But there were also some negative ones. For example, it created subtle pressure to make comments which wasn't really useful at all. So this is a student who was not happy with what we were doing. They were always the same, so not hugely useful. So we only have 3 types of nudges at the moment that are shown to students during the video. So we look at whether they made any comments at all, whether they made enough comments of different types, that kind of stuff. And they obviously notice that they are the same. So in future work, we are going to improve this by adding other types of nudges as well. So the future work, as I mentioned, more nudges. We are going to look at other possibilities for enforcing this kind of behavior, more intelligent, more in line with the learner profile. And also, we haven't done any nudges for the social phase of learning, so that would be another piece of future work. Presentation skills. We are very keen to do studies on other types of skills. And also, if anyone is interested in collaborating with us, we are really keen to see what other people think and to work together on other types of skills. So finally, I just want to thank our sponsors. This was supported by that previous grant that Tanja had from European Union, and also I got a small amount of money from Aotearoa, which is an agency in New Zealand that supports research on tertiary level teaching, and my university also provided some support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tanja. Very well organized and very stimulating talk. So it's time for your comments or questions. Yes, Ben. So do you have microphone? Yeah.
Thank you, Tanja, for a really nice talk, really interesting. Your students are really learning 2 different kinds of things here. They're learning the particular software, soft skill, let's say the presentation skill in this particular case, and other skills in future studies. ways perhaps capture the nature better. More important.
They are going to different things. You don't really have time to show off presentations. We have friends on presentation skill mark that they got for the course between students who use the platform and the rest of the class. And we also looked at the presentation marks for the whole course in comparison to the previous year's cohort, and there was a significant difference. Now, I'm not claiming that that's because of this, because only some students used it in a way that we anticipated, but at least it's some level of to include done using Qualtrics, and then they go on so that we actually have the survey implemented within the system, and it would be much easier to include information about their learning strategies and metacognitive skills within their learner profile. So that will help us then to target better people who have deficiency, for example, in self-efficacy or in a particular learning skill, and then we can track it better. But that's something we would be a very
You said that your talk, your research based on ICAP framework, and I see the CAP in the talk. And my question is about I. How do you, so that, first I understand the interaction, nudging is a key part of the interaction. To me, it's a typical way of realization of interaction. To me, the nudging is to some extent for the scaffolding or just help. So that, to me, what is it? Am I right to understand that way? Your I means mainly nudging, but you said in the explanation of the ICAP framework. To me, the more intense interaction between some systems. So how do you elaborate on this topic?
So, as I mentioned earlier, in our system we have passive learners, active learners, and constructive learners. We don't support interaction. So that's another possible way to extend the platform, to allow students to work collaboratively while they're making comments.
I read the book you mentioned, and very interesting that you use this nudge to apply for learning. And do you think there's other aspects you can still apply these principles to help to the way you want?
Yes, another good question. Thank you. Actually, I think nudges are very similar. Those of you who are familiar with constraint-based modeling, in our tutoring systems, we allow the student to do whatever they want. And then when they ask for feedback, we tell them, we give them hints. And these hints are very, very similar to nudges, actually. Our intelligent tutoring systems do not force the student to go in a particular path. They can do whatever, and we comment on them. So I think, although we are using a different word, nudge, it's really not that different from the hints that we provide in some types of tutoring systems.
Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, you mentioned interactive, passive, and constructive students. I wonder whether this fixed dynamic with system. Second, watching, I think the words not words learn behavioral. There are some change in students' behavior, but I wonder if there is any achievement in their learning. This is my.
Different types of learners. This division into passive and constructive, that's post hoc, right? So we look at what they have done in the system and we divided them later on. And the reason for this was kind of to encourage students to do more. So we can identify passive students easily. They watch the video and they haven't made any comments, and the nudges react to that type of behavior. Right? And the second one was about nudges and behavior change. So yes, nudges are one to encourage to change their behavior. They are not about eliminating freedom. Okay, they still have the choice, but it's about thinking what would be a good way to design the environment so that it is more people would engage in positive types of behaviors.
So I know you have some more. Actually, I have one more, but I think time is running out. So let me conclude her speech by giving this small gift from ICCE. Thank you very much. I think something, remember your photo, yes. Okay, thank you. So this, you have some announcement. So this concludes our speech, so we can enjoy the coffee breaks. Thank you very much.